All right, so this is a deep dive that a listener requested
Uh-huh.
on homemade dill dressing.
Mm.
And seems like we share a common enemy, that bottled stuff at the supermarket.
Yeah.
You got this recipe from Salty Side Dish,
Okay.
and you're ready to ditch the store-bought for good.
And what a recipe it is. Salty side dish always delivers, but this one, promising restaurant quality with just a handful of ingredients. That's intriguing.
Right. It almost sounds too good to be true, which
Yeah.
is always a good sign we need to investigate.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating that the recipe author, Trisha, dives right in with a bit of a manifesto. She's not just sharing a recipe, she's making a case for why homemade dressings are superior.
I appreciate that. It's easy to gloss over, but that passion often translates into a more carefully crafted recipe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's clearly thought about the why behind the what, which is always a good sign.
Exactly. Speaking of what, this ingredient list is surprisingly short. Parsley, onion powder, dill weed seasonings, sour cream, and buttermilk. Where's the secret ingredient?
The secret ingredient, my friend, is time. Notice how Trisha emphasizes a 4-hour chill time. That combined with dried herbs allows the flavors to really meld and develop a depth you just won't get from whisking something together at the last minute.
That's a great point about dried herbs. I know some people swear by fresh herbs in everything. Does using dried dill change the flavor profile in a noticeable way?
Well, it's not just about flavor. It's also about convenience. Dried herbs are more concentrated, so you need less, and they have a longer shelf life. That being said, fresh dill with its vibrant, almost grassy notes does add a certain brightness. The recipe actually addresses this, suggesting that you can use fresh dill, but you need 3 times the amount. It's a trade-off, as with most things in the kitchen.
Right, and that trade-off leads us to another interesting aspect of this recipe, the tips and tricks section. Trisha seems to be encouraging experimentation, with suggestions for adjusting the thickness, swapping out the sour cream. It feels like she's inviting us to make this recipe our own.
Absolutely, and I think that's a valuable lesson for any home cook, regardless of skill level. Recipes are fantastic guidelines, but they shouldn't feel like rigid rules. This particular recipe, with its simple base and straightforward technique, lends itself beautifully to customization.
So let's talk about customization. She mentions swapping sour cream for mayo, Greek yogurt, even a combination. But then she throws in this intriguing line about adding lemon or garlic for extra pennonizing. Now, garlic dill dressing. That piques my interest. How do you think that pungent garlic flavor would interact with the dill? Would it overpower it or complement it?
That's where things get interesting. It's all about balance. A touch of garlic, used judiciously, could add a lovely savory note that plays off the dill's brightness. Too much, however, and you risk masking those delicate herbal nuances.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the individual ingredients and how they interact.
Which is, I imagine, a skill that comes with experience, right? The more you experiment in the kitchen,
Yeah.
the more attuned you become to those flavor profiles.
Precisely. And that's where the real joy of cooking lies, wouldn't you say? In that journey of discovery, of pushing boundaries and finding new and exciting combinations.
I completely agree. Now, we've been talking about this dressing primarily in the context of salads, but Trisha hints at its versatility. She suggests using it as a sauce for grilled vegetables or fish. What other unexpected applications can you envision?
Well, dill, with its bright, slightly tangy flavor profile, has a natural affinity for seafood. I could see this dressing drizzled over grilled salmon, or even used as a marinade for shrimp skewers. It would cut through the richness beautifully, adding a refreshing counterpoint.
That's a fantastic point about dill's versatility. It's not just relegated to creamy dressings and dips. It can add a wonderful dimension to savory dishes as well.
Exactly. And let's not forget its affinity for potatoes. Imagine this dressing tossed with some roasted new potatoes. The creaminess would coat the potatoes beautifully, and the dill would add a lovely herbal fragrance.
Okay, you're making me hungry. But before we get too carried away with all the delicious possibilities, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the bottle in the supermarket aisle. Trisha boldly claims her recipe is better than store-bought. Is that just marketing hype, or is there really that much of a difference?
That's a question worth exploring because it goes beyond just this one recipe. It speaks to a larger conversation about homemade versus processed foods. Let's break down why Trisha might make that claim. When you buy a bottled dressing, you're often getting a lot more than just herbs and buttermilk. Preservatives, stabilizers, added sugars. Those are designed to extend shelf life, not necessarily enhance flavor.
And that's where the better than store-bought argument really comes into play, right? It's about having control over those elements.
Precisely. By making your own dressing, you're choosing what goes into it. You can use high-quality ingredients, control the sweetness level, and avoid any additives you'd rather not consume.
Yeah.
That translates not only to a fresher, brighter flavor, but potentially a healthier choice as well.
It's interesting because it ties into that larger trend of people becoming more conscious about what they're eating, reading labels, seeking out whole foods, understanding where their food comes from. This recipe, in a way, becomes a gateway to that whole mindset.
It's true. And what's fascinating is that even with something as seemingly simple as salad dressing, you can find a surprising amount of nuance. Take, for instance, the type of vinegar used in a store-bought dill dressing. It might be a generic white vinegar chosen for its neutral flavor and low cost, but imagine using a high-quality apple cider vinegar with its subtle sweetness and complexity. That one substitution can elevate the entire flavor profile.
And that's something you might not even think about if you've never ventured beyond the bottled dressing aisle, right? It's about developing that palate, that awareness of those subtle differences.
Exactly. It becomes a journey of culinary discovery, where even something as simple as a salad dressing can open your eyes to a whole new world of flavor.
And speaking of flavor, I have to ask, because you know me and my love of a little heat, has it ever crossed your mind to add a touch of spice to a dill dressing?
Now you're speaking my language. Dill, with its bright, almost citrusy notes, can handle a bit of heat surprisingly well. A pinch of cayenne pepper would add a fantastic kick. Or for a smokier heat, a touch of chipotle powder would be interesting.
I'm intrigued by the chipotle, that smoky element playing off the creamy base and the dill. Okay, that's going on my list of variations to try.
You won't be disappointed. And that's what I love about exploring recipes like this. They spark our creativity, encourage us to experiment and make them our own.
Absolutely. But before we get too carried away with all the potential flavor combinations, I want to circle back to one specific instruction in the recipe that caught my eye. The 4-hour chill time. Is that really essential, or is it more of a suggestion? Could you get away with a shorter chill if you're short on time?
That's a question I see a lot with recipes. And it's a testament to our modern desire for instant gratification. But in this case, that extended chill time serves a very specific purpose.
Enlighten us. What's the science behind those 4 hours?
Remember those dried herbs we talked about? Well, they need time to work their magic.
Yeah.
During that 4-hour chill, the dried herbs rehydrate, releasing their essential oils and infusing the dressing with their full flavor potential.
So it's not just about letting the flavors meld, it's about actually activating the full flavor of the herbs themselves.
You got it. And that's a principle that applies to a lot of cooking techniques, especially when it comes to herbs and spices. Time and temperature play crucial roles in extracting and developing those complex flavors.
That's fascinating. It makes you appreciate the intentionality behind a well-written recipe. It's not just a list of ingredients and steps. It's a carefully orchestrated process designed to achieve a specific result.
And that brings us to a larger point about the art of cooking. It's not just about throwing ingredients together. It's about understanding the science behind the flavors, the techniques, and the time it takes to create something truly delicious.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny how something as simple as a homemade dill dressing can lead you down such a fascinating rabbit hole. We've explored the nuances of flavor profiles, the importance of fresh ingredients, and the magic of time in the kitchen. But what I find most compelling is that sense of empowerment it gives us.
Absolutely. This recipe, in a way, empowers us to step outside the confines of commercially produced food and take control of what we eat. It's about reclaiming our culinary autonomy, understanding the ingredients, and creating something that's not just delicious, but truly our own.
You know, it's almost like a rebellion, isn't it? A small act of defiance against the homogenization of food, the mass-produced, the one-size-fits-all. This recipe becomes a symbol of individual expression, a way to say, I'm not just consuming food, I'm creating it.
It's a beautiful way of looking at it, and I think it speaks to something much bigger than just dill dressing. It speaks to a growing desire to connect with food on a deeper level, to understand its origins, its flavors, and its potential to nourish not just our bodies, but our souls as well.
And you know what? That's a pretty profound takeaway from a simple homemade dressing recipe. Who would have thought? So what's your parting thought for our listener? What should they take away from this deep dive?
I think it comes down to this. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty in the kitchen. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself to explore new flavors and to find what truly resonates with you, because that's where the real magic of cooking happens.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final question to ponder. What other unexpected ingredients can you imagine adding to this dill dressing to elevate its flavor profile? Think outside the box, explore the possibilities, and let your creativity run wild. And don't forget to share your culinary creations with us. Until next time, happy cooking.